Good morning and welcome to the Fort Rodman Complex here in New Bedford, Massachusetts. My name is Doug Bingham. I'm a Raynham resident working with the Raynham channel now, and it's my hope that we'll be able to bring you a number of interesting programs about local history, sources of fascination to myself and to many other people. We hope to show you lighthouses, the islands of the local area, the Cranberry bogs, some Cape Cod history, and lots more. This morning we're at Fort Taber, Fort Rodman, New Bedford. We're going to be touring the Military Museum right behind me. We have a docent or a volunteer here to escort us around the property to show us some of the more interesting sites and some of the more important sites. And we hope that you'll enjoy the journey with us. So without further ado, let's go inside. This building is one of the few remaining buildings from Fort Rodman, which began construction just before the First World War and shut down shortly after World War II. There were many buildings on this complex. Again, this is the only remaining one, and with the cooperation and assistance of the City of New Bedford, they have one of the prized military museums in the USA. All right, we're inside the Fort Taber Military Museum here at New Bedford, Mass. And this is just an absolutely fascinating place that will take you from the American Revolution right through the current conflicts in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, and much of the Middle East. We'll be seeing native costumes from those areas, artifacts of different types, from weapons to machine guns to uniforms to medals. You name it, they have it here. Anything having to do with American military history. We're in the old museum part of the building. This building has been expanded since it first began a number of years ago. And I'm here with Steve Rogers, who is one of the docents and more advanced leaders of the group here at Fort Taber's Military Museum. We're in a relatively untouched area since the layout is still being planned, but we're starting here with the American Revolution era. We have an item such as a piece of the upper mast of one of the masts from the USS Constitution, or old Ironsides, some firearms, muzzle loaders mostly, and various types of ammunition, cannonballs, in various states of disrepair, probably used at one time. Steve can comment more on that. So what do we have here?
Well, this building was actually the old original PX building.
Okay.
For the Fort Rodman.
All right, we're here in the certain corner of the building that houses a collection of Medal of Honor winners here in the New Bedford area, along with photographs of Abraham Lincoln and many other notable characters of the War of 1812 and the Civil War. There are cases full of arms and ammunition, clothing, different types of caps called kepi.
To tell you, these were the arms of the day: the bayonet, the sabers, cannonballs, the mini balls, and the ammunition over here.
Is anybody here familiar with the manufacturers of some of these swords and cutlasses?
That I know of.
Nobody?
Now, we have a Civil War group that meets here, and they do things at the fort here and at Fort Phoenix and Fairhaven.
And that would be the Civil War Roundtable.
Right, right. Those would be the people that would be more aware of this type of thing. I'm a Korean War era guy, so I grew up during World War II and served during Korea.
I know that there are different types of ammunition for cannons and small guns, including solid shot is a bolt shot. There's grape shot, or case shot actually. These are small pellets inside of a larger pellet that once it explodes from the heat and the pressure of the gases in the cannon, it makes a very wide field that can penetrate just about anything in its path. And various weapons along with this, and tools to clean rifles and cannons of various sizes. There are a number of people up here: William Carney, William Downey, David Gifford, Colonel David W. Wardrop, George Cummings, and George Wixon, all different medal winners from the Civil War. A very fascinating collection indeed. And there's actually a Harper's Weekly here, an original copy of a front page
Yep.
showing a battle ongoing somewhere during that Civil War era. Absolutely fascinating.
It is. It's fascinating to be down here as a volunteer.
Over in this case, we have different types of bayonets. There are sabers and cutlasses, quite different in that a saber was actually a long blade, of course, with a handle that had sharp edges on both sides, and a cutlass which actually only had one sharp edge. And this one has seen a lot of use, obviously. It was a Zouave. These were the German Civil War soldiers who fought on the American side against the Confederacy, who carried this particular type of saber. A lot of them are rusty, having been in many years in the ground. And on this side, there is a post-World War I collection of photographs taken locally here at Fort Rodman and Fort Tabor. And Steve can elaborate more on the actual name of the property that we're on. He told me at one point there really was never a Fort Tabor. Is that correct?
The Fort Tabor was a small fort built just south of the refreshment stand, and the footprint is still there. And they named it Fort Tabor because it was named after the mayor of the city at the time. When the federal government took over this land, it became Fort Rodman. And then it was federal property, and then they built the fort up. They built all the embankments, the stations for the cannon and so forth. And then when I was a boy, there were all barracks along the street coming in here, the old wooden barracks, and then there were officers' quarters on the other side of that.
Now, when exactly or approximately did this fortress actually begin in its earliest stages?
It was Robert E. Lee designed this fort, and it was designed for this when the British were after they attacked Dartmouth and New Bedford. Now, if you go through New Bedford, you'll still see some of the chimneys painted with a white stripe around them.
Yes.
That's because those were Tories who lived in those houses. So
And this is prior to the Civil War.
right. So
War of 1812, maybe?
Yep. And the British didn't burn them when they burned the village of Dartmouth and houses in New Bedford and Acushnet, which is now Acushnet. It was formerly New Bedford also.
So there really was a series of engagements around here between the British and the Americans.
Yeah, they were. Well, because a lot of the ships sailed as privateers out of New Bedford. They were legal pirates.
Yeah. I'm well acquainted with that particular era of history. Now, I knew that the British did attack up around the Cape Cod and Mass Bay coastlines as well, up through Weymouth and Scituate and Hingham.
They burnt Dartmouth, Patenarum Village, and they came into New Bedford and burnt some of the houses here. Like I said, the white stripe meant they were Tories.
Wow.
Those didn't get burnt.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. We're in the corner right now. We're looking at some artifacts and photographs and all sorts of materials pertaining to the Spanish-American War period, which was about 1898. And I was just having a little chat off camera about some of the ships that are portrayed here. The USS Maine, which blew up in Havana Harbor, Cuba, during the Spanish-American War, and it was very a controversial shipwreck. It was often thought that the ship was torpedoed or mined by the Spanish when they were occupying Cuba, but that turned out not to be the case. The Maine actually sunk because of a coal bin explosion. The evidence that was brought up in recent years has testified to that fact. And she has since been removed from Havana Harbor many years ago and was taken offshore and was sunk. And she is still a national treasure that is dived on by some very experienced divers only who are able to work at very extreme depths. And the USS Olympia, which is still afloat at Penn's Landing, which is a maritime museum in Camden, New Jersey, on the border of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And she can be boarded and observed by many people at almost any time of the year. She's a national treasure as well, but the ship you see here isn't the ship that's there right now. The ship there right now is in very fragile condition. Again, there are firearms here, pistols, single-shot pistols and revolvers. There are entrenching tools or spades, which are a fold-up device that can be attached to your waist belt or your backpack during wartime. And our cameraman, Alan Russell, is well acquainted with those. Breech loaders, belts of different types. There's an authentic wool blanket from the Spanish-American War. Stripes that were sewn onto a soldier's sleeves. Totally different color and different pattern, obviously an Irish regiment. And a model of the USS Massachusetts. This particular ship here currently rests on the bottom in very shallow water just outside the harbor at Pensacola, Florida. And there's a wonderful view here of the Camp Rodman, or the Fort Rodman property here in New Bedford, showing it in one of its heydays with various tents where the enlisted men would live, but all the officers had comfortable quarters. Go figure. And close-up photographs of the property as it once was, including the buildings where mines were stored. During World War I and World War II, New Bedford had minefields offshore, which I just learned today. I find that interesting. But given the fact that New Bedford is a very heavily and widely exposed area, it wouldn't be surprising to find out that we were susceptible to enemy attack here during World Wars I and II. There were submarines on patrol offshore. We know that to be a fact. But this is a very interesting collection. There's a photograph of the casemate, a photograph of Commodore George Dewey, and the title of Commodore is only given during wartime. That is a wartime rank for an officer. And other photographs of soldiers at various activities here in and around the Fort Taber, Fort Rodman property. There's a wall over here, a pre-World War II. Can you tell us something about this, Steve?
Okay, this is the way Fort Rodman was prior to the beginning of World War II. It was a station here. We have an aerial view of the fort as it was at the time. And again, they only fired the cannon as practice. You can see the bringing up an artillery shell. The uniforms they wore, these were blue in their day. We have a hat like this. And these are the old uniforms, showing them in the old wool overcoats. And all of these pictures are prior to World War II starting.
No. In one of my questions to you earlier about the coastal artillery, I noticed that the regiment that was here was part of the 23rd Coastal Artillery Regiment at Fort Rodman.
Yep.
They had an 8-inch disappearing gun, which I was explaining to Alan earlier, and there's a good view of the back end of one here. These are operated by hydraulics.
Yep.
They could be lowered so they could be reloaded or loaded initially and then raised up to their firing position. And I understand the concussion from these cannons was very, very great. Sometimes it would shatter glass for miles around.
They fired them one time and they shattered all the glass in the barber shop that was on the base. The barber came in the next day and found glass all over the place.
Wow.
I think we have...
We got a surprise here. My good friend Don Perkins. We have a replica of Fort Taber, and that is out here at the entrance. We'll be seeing that eventually on the way out. And this is the man who designed this amazing tabletop replica, my good friend Don Perkins from Cape Cod. Don is quite renowned for his model making abilities, and his models are in many lighthouse museums, primarily, all over the East Coast and the northeastern U.S.